Marriages are under attack today, and many struggle to be filled with laughter and joy and openness and intimacy. What do you tell couples who are struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, let's see what the Bible has to say about that.
Hey, welcome to our podcast. I'm so glad that you clicked on this to watch. If you would, go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel. Every Wednesday morning, we have podcasts come out. And if you want to share this with someone else that you know may need this, that would be great.
Yeah. So from time to time, Christian couples need help in their marriage.
Yeah.
There should be no shame in that. There often is. But there's times when we need some input and counsel from outside of us.
Yeah. I mean, wise counsel is everything in your Christian walk.
Yeah, it is. And Heather and I, from time to time, have needed someone outside of us to help us get through where we have been in that moment. And when Heather and I do premarital counseling with couples, we try to drive that point home. Is in the course of life and married life, there's going to be some times where you're going to hit some bumps, and there's going to be some times you're going to need some input and some help, and that's okay. In fact, it's good to seek that counsel and not let isolation drive you into further despair.
Absolutely.
So from time to time, I have the privilege of doing that with some couples, being able to sit down with them. Sometimes it's Heather and I, sometimes it's me. And because couples find themselves in places that are hard. And so they find themselves struggling with communication.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic in any relationship, but even more so marriage, as it is such a vulnerable relationship.
Yeah, and there's a lot of time together, and there's opportunities to bump up against one another's different ways of viewing life and communicating. And so couples, they find themselves misunderstanding one another. They find themselves where they can't seem to understand that other person, can't seem to get them to understand them. And simple conversations turn into big conflicts. And that's frustrating. It is. And so when that happens, couples will sometimes call for counsel and ask for help in the process. Couples sometimes find themselves where the joy they once had is diminished. Some time has passed, some things have happened, and they just find themselves going through the motions. They find themselves where the marriage relationship has gotten boring. They're just going through the routine, the mundane, and there's nothing exciting. There's nothing to look forward to, and they're stuck in kind of the monotony of life. And it can happen, especially when you're raising children, and you've got several kids in the home, and you've got work, and you've got activities, and you're trying to get through life. And often you don't have the same amount of time you once did in marriage for one another. And so it's easy to get into that place, and sometimes you need some help along the way in that moment. Sometimes couples come in because they've reached a place where those are happening, and maybe the place where faith has become absent from the relationship, where there's very little spiritual conversation. There's a lack of praying together or for one another. There's a little vision about where God is in their relationship, where God is working through them as a couple. There's maybe little honesty, or very closed off to being vulnerable with one another and talking about faith. And when that happens, often couples still go to church, still go through the routine, but even that becomes this monotonous routine where you kind of disengage that from the reality of life, and it's hard to see, where is faith, where is God in my marriage? Sometimes it happens when couples get to the place where there's little or no intimacy. And that can be physical. It can also even just be emotional, or even, again, spiritual intimacy, where all of a sudden there's very little depth. It's a very shallow relationship. There's really no sense of deep connection and closeness. There's no dependence upon one another. And that's sad when that happens. It can get to a place where couples, they find themselves, they pull back into their own worlds. That often happens. The wife has her activities that she'll pull off into, or the husband has his activities he pulls off into. And pretty soon they're in their own separate worlds. Hopelessness starts to set in. They stop trying to make it work because everything they've tried up to that point isn't working. And you get to this place where even that other person that sits across from you is like, everything they do is irritating, The conflict is one thing, but all of a sudden it's like, man, just the way they breathe right now is just irritating to me, It happens. Yeah. It happens for couples. Yeah. And in its worst form, couples get to the place where it seems to them at least where it's impossible, and separation or divorce seem like the only option. And it's sad when that happens.
I mean, that whole kind of description right there just sounds like a sad, long, dark, deep spiral all the way down to hopelessness. And so, I mean, like, the question is, what hope is there for the Christian couple who has found themselves maybe in that place? Is the only option to be like, well, I'll pray for you, or like, or for someone else to be like praying for you.
Exactly.
What actions is there to take?
Yeah. It's tough because the other thing that happens is Christian circles, they don't like to mention that to anybody because it's kind of humbling and vulnerable. So from time to time, though, I will have the time. I don't always have the time to do this, but I'll have the time to meet with couples and talk with them. And what we're going to talk about today on the podcast are 7 of the most common topics we talk about. Often we drill down much deeper than we're going to today. We're going to hit the highlights of each one of them. But these are the 7 things that are the most helpful and are most often talked about when they come in and I talk with couples. We'll talk about their situation, but these things are what we talk about and that lead to hope and life for couples, because there is hope, there is life,
absolutely.
There is counsel, there is truth, there is a way to walk in marriage by faith as God designed it.
Yeah. And so as you listen to this podcast, maybe you are listening to it with your spouse, or maybe you're listening to it and then you're thinking about talking to your spouse about it. I think with each of these points, maybe take some notes with it and then go and talk with them about it, because this is where, again, going back to the first point of communication, that's usually where the initial breakdown is in a marriage or in a relationship. And so to take these points that you're going to see here soon, write them down, make some notes about it, and then go and talk with your spouse about it. I think it'd be very beneficial for everyone's marriage.
Yeah. So let's get started with again what I normally will talk about at some point in the conversation after we've kind of walked through where the struggle is. The first thing I usually try to get to first is have the couple acknowledge, or we all acknowledge, that God has a pattern for marriage, and that pattern is foreign to us. It's a simple point to say, but it's a hard point to take in, because often, well, for all of us, we saw a pattern of marriage growing up. And not everybody had a healthy one. No one had a perfect one before them. No one saw a perfect model of marriage. So we have to all at least recognize, okay, what I saw growing up, what I saw in my parents and in others around me was not the perfect pattern.
Yes, I was going to say, and then to say, I didn't have the perfect pattern. I'll just go with what's natural to me then, and try to go into marriage and just relate to my spouse just like I would relate to anyone else.
You're my best buds.
Yeah.
That's faulty as well, because you didn't have it modeled for you perfectly. You didn't learn it perfectly anywhere. Some churches are teaching a good model for marriage relationships.
There are good books out there.
There are some good books. There are some not so good books. There's a lot of unhealthy teaching, and the world doesn't know the way of God's pattern in marriage. So acknowledging, okay, there's a pattern. It's foreign to me. It's not what's natural to me. I don't care who you are, how good your intentions are. You do not naturally know the way to have a biblically based, Jesus-filled marriage. You just don't. That only comes from walking with God and knowing God and His Word. So it's imperative that we come to this place where we acknowledge, okay, I don't fully know the pattern. I haven't done it. I'm not doing it. I need help in it. That's an important place to start.
It's an important place for every area of your life. It's obviously important for marriage, but it's important even before that in your own personal life. I heard a thing one time that said, there's no such thing as married people problems, but there's only such thing as a person problem. A personal, internal, spiritual. If you can't admit I'm a sinner before God first, I don't know if you're going to be able to get to the place that you say, hey, this way of marriage is foreign to me, but let's keep going. What'd you say?
Yeah, for sure. And if a couple comes in together and they both can get to that spot quickly, that's a good thing.
That's great. Yes.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes neither are in that place. Sometimes one of them is in that place and the other one's not.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, having one is necessary. Having two is very beneficial.
Yeah.
But God can still work even if it's just one. So that's the first place, or the first real subject that we usually try to get to in counseling. The second is this, is that God's design is for marriage to be vibrant, passionate, and life-giving. Now, most people would say, duh, of course. It sounds right. It ought to be. It should be. But if you recognize you haven't really ever seen it in its perfect form and you need help with it, then now you can start applying that to your life and say, okay, well then what I've seen doesn't have to be what I do. We all grow up seeing a pattern. Mm-hmm. And because that pattern has been passed to us, not in just what we saw, but in our DNA as well, we end up doing that same pattern. Mm-hmm. And so therefore something has to interrupt the pattern with a different way. And God has a way. And just because you've walked in a pattern, saw a pattern, doesn't mean it has to always be that way. There is a place of hope. Mm-hmm. Marriage does have struggle to it. Yeah. Honestly, marriage does require work. That's important to understand. Mm-hmm. But marriage is intended to be this incredible gift filled with joy, where the other person is a delight to you, where you are filled with patience and kindness and understanding, not because they're perfect, exactly. but because you have determined by God's strength to be and walk in his pattern. Yeah. So we know this is what God intended because he, in his word, says that marriage is the greatest and loudest and most vibrant picture of what it looks like for God to know man and man to know God. Yeah. In the New Testament, we find that husbands are to love their wives like Christ loved the church, and wives are to love their husbands in the same way the church loves Christ. So here is God giving us the pattern that marriage is to look just like and show the world what it looks like when God knows man and man knows God, and they love one another in that. So absolutely. Therefore, his design is good. His design has purpose. His design is meant to be life-giving. It's meant to be powerful. It should cause others to look and say, that's what it looks like to know God. Yes. Exactly. So marriage is a good design that God has, and it's meant to fill us with joy and purpose regardless of where you've been, what you've walked in. Yeah. So
I'll say it's not meant to be the most dull relationship you have. Yeah, right. It's not meant to be the demeaning relationship you have, or the guilt-filled, or the sarcastic, or all those things. But instead, the life-giving, the fulfilling, the like you've said, vibrant, passionate, all that stuff.
It shouldn't be the thing you dread.
No.
It shouldn't be the thing like, well, I've got to leave work and go home now to my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what it is intended to be. Yeah. So,
but that is where some people do live.
It's true. So this is where we meet them. Yeah. All right. Now, each of these topics today we're going to cover are going to take us deeper. So you might think, all right, those are way elementary so far. I agree. They're elementary, but they're essential. Yes. So let's start moving into a little bit deeper understanding of what God's called us to, and what I tell couples in counseling. Number 3 is this, that God's pattern for marriage involves two radically different people laying down their lives for one another. This is marriage. God designed it for men and women. Now, the world and its system today is hijacking all of that, attempting to distort and rewrite and redefine those terms. But God has a specific design and intent in marriage being for a man and a woman, because he designed them differently. Yeah. As much as the world would think those are interchangeable genders that are disposable and changeable and up to your feelings and desires of the moment. No, they are very unique design, man and woman, both physically different, but physiologically different as well. They think differently. Yeah. They process differently. They relate differently. They communicate differently. They feel differently. And so therefore they communicate differently. And if you diminish the differences, then you diminish the design. Yep. And so we are called to know the design. We're called to celebrate the design, celebrate the differences, be able to understand them. And a couple laugh about those from time to time, and understand we see things differently, but out of this great, vast difference comes this beauty of love, of laying down your life for one another. Again, the beauty of God loving us and us loving God, two parties that are vastly different, but finding oneness because of love and sacrifice. So one of the resources that I recommend often is a book or two books by Shaunti Feldhahn, and one is called For Women Only, and one is called For Men Only. So obviously, guys, you'll know which one is for you. It's for the men only, and women for women only. So what they do, she does this marvelous job of pointing out the unique differences in the way men think and women think, the way men process, the way women process, the way men communicate, or the way women communicate. And they are foreign languages to one another. I've read that book a couple of different times. Yeah. Heather and I have discussed it, and every time time I read it, we talk about it. It's just like, okay, there's more insight here, and I find that is a foreign language. Yeah. She totally speaks a foreign language. It is knowable. Yeah. It is discernible. It is understandable, but it's not natural to me.
It takes work. Exactly. Yep.
So knowing that helps, having those conversations together to say, now, I read this in the book that women think this way. Is that true? And she'll say, yeah, it's way true. Yeah. It's very, very true. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm having to form new pathways in my brain. Yeah. Okay, I need to shift my thought, my focus on how I have thought about her, related to her, and be able to speak to her. So again, those are powerful resources.
Yeah. Or even just in the same vein, the book, Women Are Like Spaghetti and Men Are Like Waffles. Again, the idea of even the way that they think, even the way that men and women think, compartmentalized, or all the thoughts and feelings and emotions flow together. All this.
I'm not necessarily recommending that.
No, but I'm just saying that's another illustration.
Because what's natural is, I'm going to love this other person the way I would want to be loved. I mean, I would think this would be cool. I would think I would feel loved by this, so I'm going to do that for them.
Exactly.
Well, that's a very narrow perspective. That's me loving you out of me, for me, the way I think.
Exactly.
That's not how it works. That's not what God did for us. He chose to love us in a way we could understand. So now, I'm in love and in marriage, I'm not trying to make you like me. I'm not trying to relate to you like I relate to me and want other people to relate to me. No, I am loving you in the way that you want to be loved and need to be loved and hear love. So this requires change of my thinking and thoughts and my ways. Yeah. And as we'll go through this, we're going to keep making this point today, that this only works for a committed believer in Jesus Christ. Yeah. This is not a pattern that anybody in the world can pick up and lay as a template over their marriage and say, yep. That'll work. No, exactly. This is a plan. This is a design that God gave that is only possible in full dependence upon Him.
Exactly.
For He is Lord of all. Because two people who are radically different cannot love one another without laying down their life for one another.
Exactly.
And you can't do that if you don't know that kind of love in your heart from God first.
Yes.
So, boy, so I often spend a lot of time with couples just on that point of how radically different each is and what the other person needs. And those usually lead to some of the most revolutionary moments for couples when they realize, okay, that is what a man thinks. This is how he hears love. This is how a woman hears love. And this is what actually is hurtful to a woman. This is what's actually hurtful to a man. You start discussing those, and often couples are like, oh, man, I have been doing the wrong things. I see it now. I thought this was the right thing to do, but I recognize now that was actually hurting our relationship.
Yeah.
So all right, that's number 3.
Yeah.
There's often so much more to that, but for sake of time here, we'll go on.
Yeah.
Number 4, God's pattern for marriage requires a covenant of 100% sacrifice. So we naturally in our world today, we tend to think more in terms of contracts. If we strike up a business deal with someone or purchase something, there's a contract that we might sign. Contract is designed to guarantee that other person will do their part as long as I do my part. Mm-hmm. There's a understanding, use a lot of words, and then a signature, and it is based on distrust. Contracts are based on distrust. We're going to sign this because you just in case you don't, I'll have an option to take you to court and get what I deserve.
So good.
That is natural thinking.
Yep.
That is never how God discusses or describes or designs marriage. It is always covenant. Covenant is different than contract. Contract says, I'll do as long as you do, but the minute you stop doing, I'm coming after you. Mm-hmm. That's contract. Covenant says, I'm in this, I love you, and nothing can stop me from loving you. Mm-hmm. It's permanent. Yeah. It's not based on them, it's based on you. And when you enter into this covenant, the two enter in with that covenant mindset, covenant to God first, and then to one another. Now we have the basis for God's design for marriage. Yep. So along with the contract thinking, often comes percentage thinking that says, all right, this is what the world often says, it's a 50-50 relationship. I'll do 50, you do 50, and together we make 100. That sounds pretty, and it sounds classic. Yeah. Got it. But it is an epic fail. Yeah. Because it then is saying, I will do my part as long as you do your part.
And I'll only give half of myself.
True.
At the same time.
Yeah. And if you're still doing your part, I'll still do my part. If you stop doing some of your part, I'm going to pull back and stop doing some of my part, which makes them do a little bit less on their part, which makes you do a little less on your part. And pretty soon, the minute you go down that path, no one's doing anything. Yep. And both are frustrated. Yep. I've heard variations of the illustration. I've heard, it should be 80-20. I've heard different versions of that. But really, there's only one. And you might say, oh, it's 100-100.
Yes.
Yes. It's actually 100, period.
Yeah.
You, whether you're the husband or you're the wife, make a covenant promise to God. I am going to do 100% based on what you've called me to do. I'm going to love regardless. Yep. I'm not going to wait and measure whether they've done 10 to figure out if I want to do 90. or any version of that. Yeah. They did 10, I do 10. They did 20. Okay, I think I'll bump it up to 20. Yeah. Oh, they're up to 50? All right, I'm up to 50. Yeah. Oh, they're back down to 30? I'm back down to 30. That is a recipe for disaster in a marriage. So the Christian marriage is based on loving as God loves. Yeah. And he loved us while we were still zero. In fact, the Bible says while we were still enemies, he loved us. Yep. Christ died for us while we were still sinners. So put into our numbers we're talking about here. While we were 0, he was 100. Yep. That's the pattern. That's the plan. It's foreign to us. It's not natural to us. It's probably not what we've seen in real life. But this is the real demand. This is the joy. This is where the hope comes from when I give 100, regardless of the other person's response. And this is often a radically new concept when you talk with couples because they haven't seen or heard that before, unless they've been around some good Christian authors or churches. So
sure. And I think, again, just still another thing that proves that this is unnatural thinking is because as soon as you hear this, you're thinking, okay, this requires 100. Yeah, but what if they still are this, or what if they still do these things? Then when do I stop? That's the part where we say this, it has to be the committed believer in Christ. Yeah. Because this requires faith. This kind of relating to your spouse requires faith to say, I'm going to give 100%, knowing that God gave 100% to me, and that's what changed my life. So I'm going to do the same.
Yep.
Not so that he didn't do it, so that but he did it.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
So we now do the same thing.
Yep. Which really brings us to the number 5 today. And again, we're slowly stepping deeper into the deep end of the pool here. Here it is. Number 5. Your role is to look to God for your needs and then give to your spouse what they need. It is tempting to want to look to your spouse for all of your emotional, relational needs. They're right there in front of you.
Yeah.
They're flesh and blood.
They're inside you.
You committed to them. They're committed to you. It's easy to look at them and say, I need to feel accepted. How come you're not making me feel more accepted? I need to feel more understood. How come you're not making me feel more understood? I need to feel more valued. How come you're not making me feel more valued?
Yeah.
I understand those needs.
Yeah.
But just from my own experience, if I start looking to Heather to meet my deeper needs, I am putting an unfair pressure on her that she can never fully meet because they're deeper than her ability to meet.
Yeah.
That's nothing negative about Heather.
No, but the needs that are inside of you can't be filled by just someone that's right here outside in this world.
Yeah. I have my own past. Everybody does. So whatever your past is, let's say you had some things in your life where maybe you weren't loved as you wanted to or needed to be by a parent. Maybe there was even some emotional abuse. Maybe there was some physical abuse. Yeah. And so you move forward, and maybe you were neglected growing up. Maybe you went through some hurtful situations during your childhood years or your teen years, and you come into marriage and you've got this hole in your heart.
Yeah.
There is a hole there that your spouse on their best day still can't fill.
Yeah, it's true.
And to expect them to somehow meet that in you is unrealistic for them, and it will be frustrating for you and frustrating for them because you'll always be in the deficit, and they'll always be in the deficit as well.
Yep.
You won't have it like you want it, and they can't give it like you want it. And so when they're both doing that, it ends up in a very dark, difficult place. It's two people that are frustrated with one another.
So true.
So the key, we're in the deeper end of the pool now. My role as a husband is to take every need, longing, desire I have and say, God, you alone can meet that in me. And I'm going to cry out to you, seek you, and look for you to fulfill that in me. All the need I have to feel worthy, accepted, valued, forgiven, chosen, loved, precious.
Yep.
That has to come from him. And when that happens, it fills up the tank, it fills up the hole to the point where you actually can overflow that now. And now you can love them as they need to be loved. So when two people are doing that in a marriage, it is abundantly blessed. But when one does it, they're blessed. And so that's our calling. This is one of those, again, you can't look at them and say, well, they're not doing it. I'm not going to do it. No, you violated another concept. We've already talked about truth here. So at this point, it's me looking for God to fill me, and then out of the overflow, I give to them. So you might imagine that as 2 cups. If 2 cups are the 2 people in a marriage, and there's a certain amount of, let's say, water in the cup, and each one says, well, I'm going to pour into you. And so they pour into them a little bit, and the other one says, I'm going to pour into you. I'll pour into you a little bit, but I also have to pour into my kids, and I have to pour into friends at work. I have to pour into my job, and I have to pour into church and other people. And then there's less in the cup, and they say, well, I really need you to fill my cup. And so they, give a few drops there, and then they're like,
empty.
I need you to fill my cup. How come you don't fill my cup more? How come you don't fill my cup more?
Yeah,
because neither of them were designed to be the ones to fill the cup to begin with.
Yep. And then you're going to be looking everywhere else to try to get filled.
Yeah. Yes. But when God becomes the filler of your cup, then out of your overflow from the place where you're full, then you can give to them.
Yep.
This is the design. This is more, again, down the road, marriage maturity. I look to God for my filling and all my needs, and then I give out of that to the other. And this is what produces the overflow of joy in a marriage.
Yeah.
All right. Number 6, then, as we move deeper into the pool, is to understand that your role is to learn your spouse and love them in the way they understand love. Now, this goes back to something we kind of touched on earlier. We naturally want to love or think about loving in the way we want to be loved.
Exactly.
It's our world. That's what we know. And we know it very well because it's us. And so we think, oh, well, if they were me, I would want to be loved this way. So we love them in that way. And it may speak, but oftentimes the way we understand love is not how they understand love.
Yeah.
And so a couple can actually be attempting to love one another and showing it, but missing one another completely.
Yeah. So good.
And so it's important that we learn their language and their heart. And if that's whatever it is that they love and enjoy, whatever that is, do that thing. Here's another good book that's out there. Deals with the 5 love languages. There's a lot of variations of it out today. It's a great way to understand how people process and take in love in their life. And then to recognize, all right, my role then in loving my wife or loving your husband, ladies, is to know their language. And then out of how Christ has filled you, love them in their language, not your language. And so if you don't know what that is, if you don't know their language, you can have a hard time loving them.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to speak their language, you're going to have a hard time loving them. I'd even say if there's not an element of sacrifice involved in loving them, you may not be loving them.
Yeah.
And if there's not something in you that says, I have to absolutely depend upon Christ for the information, the truth, the desire, and the knowledge and the ability to love them, then you're really not loving them.
Yeah.
Love comes from God. Love comes from the overflow. And so I have to get all I need from Him and then love them in the way they need to be loved, not the way I want to love.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. And that point's not hard enough for you.
And then finally, what we often tell couples is that no matter where you are right now in the situation, you might think my marriage is in a dark spot. It's in a tough spot. It's in a seemingly hopeless spot. It's in a spot that I think is dead.
Yeah.
God is the one who redeems, restores, and resurrects dead things.
Yep.
So no matter where you are, where you've walked, what you're in today, there is hope.
Yeah.
That hope is in Jesus Christ. I've sat with couples in my office who have said, if you can't tell us something different today, this is it. We're done. I've sat with couples who one would call me in advance and say, I'm going to confess to my spouse today infidelity. I need you there. I've sat with those couples through that, and it is awkward, it's painful, it's difficult. But I've watched those same couples heal through that and then go on to have vibrant marriages, not trouble-free marriages, but vibrant, living marriages where they so love one another that in some of them there have been some very tangible sacrifices for the other and beautiful things come out of it.
Wow.
Stuff that were just absolutely miraculous, things that you would have thought there's no way this can be resurrected, but I've seen it happen time and time again. Wow. Jesus makes all
so
things
good.
new.
So good.
So there are the things that I tell couples when they come in.
Yeah.
Now,
it's good stuff.
We usually have a lot longer conversation than we're having today. We bring it right into the very realities of life, and it takes time, and sometimes it's through tears, and it's through prayer, and it's through intentionality, and it's through faith that God does resurrect dead things, and He can resurrect marriages even that are lifeless, boring, empty, filled with conflict and dead. So be encouraged today because of all that. So
love it.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today. Hope it's been helpful to you.
Yeah.
It is our desire to lift him up and live him out, and marriage is one of the key places that we do that. So blessings to you. May hope fill you. May the resurrected Lord fill your hearts and mind and your marriage with new life and new hope.
It's good.